Hey, vinyl community, welcome to a very special episode. I am here with a guest that you probably recognize, Tim Durling, whose channel is Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Tim and I have collaborated on episodes in the past. We've done AC/DC videos, we've done Rush videos. We did a Heart video on Tim's channel. We've collaborated on a number of different videos, both on Tim's channel and my channel. But if you have not yet checked out Tim's channel, please be sure to head over to Tim's Vinyl Confessions, particularly if you like your hard rock 80s, 90s, and beyond. Tim's got a fantastic collection. As you can see behind him, he collects cassettes, he collects vinyl, CDs, and most interestingly, 8-track tapes as well. So if you're interested in seeing Tim's 8-track tape collection, which is very extensive, I would recommend you check out Tim's videos. But welcome, Tim, once again.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's always fun. We can do these videos together. We have done, we did a Deep Purple one earlier this year. And yeah, but this is a Rush one that you would ask me about. And I thought, I don't know, but I'll let you take it from here because obviously I agreed to it. So I think it's gonna be fun.
Sure. Well, Tim and I had done a couple of videos. We've done a pair of videos. We had gone through our Rush CD collections. And I had thought, because I know Tim is a huge Rush fan, Tim's got several Rush videos actually on his channel. I thought, who better to ask to do this video with me, which is going to be our top 10 favorite Rush songs. And when you're talking about a band like Rush, who spans literally 4 decades, it's a real hard list to compile because they have so much great music. They have so many different eras as well, even though for the most part, except for the first album, they retained the same lineup. And it's a really daunting task to try to narrow it down to 10 songs like that. I don't know. I'm sure it was hard for you.
It was extremely difficult. They are one of my favorite bands of all time. And I just started jotting down songs that I guess mean the most to me from their catalog. And, eventually I got it to 10 with a couple of honorable mentions. And I won't go into a lot of detail about the honorable mentions. One of the first things I have to say is that Tom Sawyer is not on my list. Not that I don't think it's a magnificent song. It didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me. And it's, some bands, I'm going to pick on that song for a bit, not really pick on it, just discuss it. But some bands, if a radio station only plays one song by them, sometimes it's not a representative song. Like if you got a pop station you listen to that plays like 70s, 80s, and the only Van Halen song they ever play is Jump, that's not really representative of Van Halen as a whole. But the thing is, when Tom Sawyer comes on, number one, it sounds like Rush. It's completely representative of them. It might be their quintessential song. Number two, you're still hearing Rush on the radio, which I never get tired of. So if that's the only song that some stations play, at least they're playing Rush. But that song's not on my list. And the other thing I do want to say is that it is primarily, as Jeff said, my list is for the most part, with one exception, 70s, 80s. But I got into the band in the late 80s, so I listened to all of those albums so much, and they're just imprinted in my brain. And it doesn't mean that they didn't do good, wonderful music past the 90s. As a matter of fact, I don't know about you, Jeff, I have been listening and re-listening to Clockwork Angels. I don't know how many times I've listened to that this year. It's the last thing we'll ever get from them, so I've been just trying to take it all in. And there's a couple of songs on Clockwork Angels that have risen so far up my list. I almost thought about putting either the Anarchist or the Wreckers in my list. That's how much I love that album. But I'm glad to do this. I'm happy to do it. And I'm curious to what we're going to come up with together, like between the two of us, if there's going to be any overlap.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure there will be. And like you, Tom Sawyer is not on my list. But unlike, some bands' signature songs like Stairway to Heaven or Carry On Wayward Son, when that comes on the radio, I don't feel like I have to turn it off because that's a song I can hear repeatedly and not get sick of. And I can't say the same for a lot of some of my favorite bands, their most recognizable radio hits. So yeah, it should be a very interesting list. And Tim, you had mentioned you've got 2 honorable mentions. So do you want to talk about those?
Sure. And because I know that you and I are both big on collecting cassettes, all of my selections I just happen to own on cassette. So I thought I would do it that way. I thought that'd be an interesting way to do it. But I'm going to kill two birds with one stone with this one. Both of these songs appear on Archives, the double cassette set. It's a 3-record set, never released on CD. Wish they would have, and it's just their first 3 albums in one spot. So my honorable mentions are Working Man and Anthem. Working Man from the first album and Anthem from Fly By Night. Those are 2 of my favorite early Rush tracks.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I love Working Man, and we might hear a little bit more about that song as we go through our list. I did pick 2 honorable mentions. The first one that I picked is The Body Electric. I love that track. And, sometimes people don't care for the 80s Rush because they feel like there's too much synthesizer, or that was when they really got into kind of some keyboard work. But I don't care. I think Grace Under Pressure is a great album. I love that particular song. And then my second honorable mention is I'm going with Subdivisions, obviously off of Signals. And when I was in college, I remember when I heard that song, I'm into like 80s new wave and synth pop. And I just love the synthesizer on that song, the way that it opened. And they use it in a very tasteful way. It's not a cheesy synthesizer sound, much like the Police. When they use synthesizers, it wasn't like some 80s, pop bands were using them. So I really appreciated that texture that they started to use, starting with Signals. And I love the theme of that. I mean, who in high school hasn't felt that way and can't identify with the subject matter of Subdivision? So those are my 2. And we'll get into the meat and potatoes of our list with number 10.
Okay, so my number 10 is one of my favorite albums by them. It's from that album, from Signals. It's track 2, The Analog Kid. I absolutely love this song, always have. I know that it got some rock radio play. I don't think that it was ever released as a single, although I think it made quite a few concert set lists over the years. I love, it's another story. Neil's talked about the story behind it, about being a young kid, and it's just a fun song. You don't always think of Rush songs as being fun, but it is fun, and there's still plenty of room for Rush to do what they do best and show off their chops. Alex throws in a blazing guitar solo in the middle of it, and Neil's drumming is great. Geddy's vocals are spot on. The synthesizers, as you mentioned, synthesizers are very tasteful. I love the you move me part. The synthesizers are really cool there. I just love the song, and it's always been a favorite of mine that wasn't maybe one of their best known songs. So yeah, The Analog Kid.
Yeah, and that's a great album, because ironically enough, my number 10 is also off of Signals. I went with Digital Man. And one of the reasons why I like that song so much is because I'm a huge Police fan. And that song really reminds me, like, you could tell they'd been listening
very
Police.
Police-ish.
Yeah, very much Zenyatta Mandata and Ghost in the Machine era Police. And so I love that. It almost sounds kind of like a tribute in a way to the Police, but yeah, that's always been a standout track for me on Signals.
Yeah, that one in New World, man, they were dipping into the same well, and Neil's made no secret about how much they all have said that they were influenced by the Police, and I think over the years Neil and Stuart Copeland got to be good friends. So yeah, good choice. I always wondered if the Digital Man is the Analog Kid grown up. It's just 2 songs apart on the Signals album. So
yeah, exactly.
Number 9 for me. Number 9 for me is my one and only song from the 90s. From Test for Echo, track 2, Driven. I love this song. It was a single and it was a video. It was a very cool video. I've always been a fan of this song. It starts out with a really heavy riff from Alex, just him by himself before the band kicks in. And in typical Rush fashion, you think it's going to be a certain rhythm, but no, when it comes in, it's like, oh, it's going to go like this. And I have to make special mention of the fact that if you have the Rush in Rio DVD, when that song comes to a halt in the middle of it, Geddy does this insane bass solo that's not on the recorded version. And so not only is that bass solo very impressive, when you watch the documentary that came with Rush and Rio, he talks about how he stretched I think a ligament or a tendon in one of his fingers, the main finger he uses to play bass with. So to know that he did that insane bass playing with a finger that was not at 100% strength makes me like it even more. But Driven is just a really cool song. It's heavy in parts, and a lot of people don't like Tespereco. It's my favorite of their '90s albums, and I just wanted to give that song some attention.
Yeah, no, that is a great album. That might be my favorite album from that particular era of Rush. But yeah, no, agreed. And I like the fact that, you know, Geddy Lee had that, you know, the show must go on, and yet he performed that solo brilliantly. So
yeah.
My number 9, I'm going with Working Man, which is one of your honorable mentions. And, you know, I know it's not Neil Peart on drums, but still, that song still gets played on the radio today over here, believe it or not. And I think it's just a great, interesting part of their debut album. So they sound a little bit different even than how they sounded on their next album, Fly By Night. But I think it's a great jam. I think it shows their chops, shows what a great power trio they were. And, you know, I think the solos are great. It's a great song. And yeah, I don't know what more I can say about it, but I love it off the debut.
Yeah, Working Man and Anthem were both in my top 10. They just got shuffled out. But yeah, I love both of those songs. But Working Man's a great song, very important in their career. It was the song that basically got them signed in Cleveland, out of Cleveland, WMMS. And you know, if it weren't for that song, who knows what might have happened. And you know, I'm very happy to say, you know, through the videos I've done through Rush fans, I've gotten to know Donna Halper. She's just a very, very, very knowledgeable lady and very easy to talk to. And she played a big role in getting them signed to Mercury out of the States. So Working Man is a vital song. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with John Rutsey's drumming. I mean, you know, he was a perfectly fine early 70s hard rock drummer, you know. Fate was destined to be different for them, but I have no problem with the first album. And Working Man is definitely my favorite song. It's probably the best known song off the debut Rush album too. So my number 8 is from the first Rush album I ever owned. I didn't get it till 1987. That's the year I really got into Rush. But from Permanent Waves, one of their first really, really big albums all over the world. This isn't the tape that I used to have. I wish I still had it. It's the final song on this album, Natural Science. This one has always been a favorite song of mine. It's like a mini epic. I think it's about 7 minutes long all told. It goes through different changes, and I love every part of it. I love the fact that you can hear at the beginning of it, Alex is strumming these guitar chords. You can hear they recorded it outside, so you can hear like a stream or a lake. You can hear water and the effects on Geddy's vocals. But then when it kicks in with the heavier riff, I always thought that that was a precursor to Tom Sawyer, because it's got that sort of, I don't know if it's 7/4, but it's got that sort of stop-start rhythm. It's like the dun 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 dun, like that. And they sort of and using that in Tom Sawyer and in other songs too. But Natural Science, it's melodic in places, it's heavy in places. Alex does some really, really different sounding solos in it. I love Permanent Waves. I mean, any song off Permanent Waves could occupy this particular number, but I wanted to give an extra shout out to Natural Science. And the band themselves has said, Alex has said in the past that Natural Science is one of the most challenging songs to play. And when they've played it really well, it's very, very rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's always been, I've gone on record in our videos of saying that's my favorite Rush album. And what a way to close out that album. I love the fact that it ends on that note. And actually my number 8 is also from Permanent Waves, but I'm going with Jacob's Ladder. I've always loved that track, and there's so many different parts to it. You've got kind of that ominous, and it really, when you think about it's talking about like the clouds and the dark sky, and you've got that dun, 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 dun. It just kind of builds like that. And then you get into kind of the heart of the song, and you've got, great guitar solos there. And then it moves into kind of that keyboard, that synthesizer, that whole thing, I think is very cool, very progressive rock. of them. And yeah, I've always loved it because it's a journey. And like I'll talk about with some of the other tracks that I mentioned in my list, I love tracks that they don't stay in the same place. It's not verse, chorus, solo, and then, verses again or whatever, or reprise. It takes you on a journey. It starts in one place and then you kind of move along into different suites and different themes and movements and tempos and all sorts of changes. And that's one of the things I love about Rush is they have so many songs like that. And people have taken me to task because I did a list on one of my channels of progressive rock albums, and I included a couple of Rush albums that I thought, had some really great progressive rock songs. And, some people are like, Rush is not progressive rock. And I'm like, well, I disagree. You haven't heard enough Rush if you don't think that they've got some progressive rock elements. But I've already been on that pulpit long enough. So, anyway, Jacob's Ladder is my number 8.
Yeah. All at once, the cloud. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's almost a precursor to Moving Pictures, because when they approached Moving Pictures, they wanted every song on that album to be very cinematic. Well, Jacob's Ladder describes an approaching, thunderstorm perfectly. And also when the thunderstorm ends, and the clouds part, and here comes the sun. It's no pun intended, Beatles reference there, but that could have fit on Moving Pictures. They were already moving in that cinematic direction. Yeah. My next one is probably the second newest one on here. It's from 1989's Presto album, and it was the second single from the album called The Pass. I think this is one of Rush's most emotionally potent songs. It's beautifully written. It's very heartfelt. It's a song about teenage suicide, and in an era where mental illness is talked about a lot more than it was. Neil was kind of ahead of the curve there, and I just think it's one of their most beautiful melodic compositions. It's very compelling. Geddy's vocals are very heartfelt in it, and it's always been a favorite of mine. But it's one of those ones that over the years, lyrically, it's kind of met more. And Neil has always said that he's not able to play The Pass without being emotionally affected by it, because not just the lyrics, but just the music. He said, I think it's one of our better compositions in that way. But Presto is kind of an overlooked album in the Rush catalog. I have fond memories of it. It was the first Rush studio album I bought after becoming a new fan. So it's the first studio album I waited for. But The Pass is next on my list.
Yep. That's a great one. I know there's a lot of people who don't care for Presto. It's not my favorite Rush album by a mile, but I still enjoy it. I still listen to it from time to time, kind of like the way they sort of closed the door kind of on their 80s era with, heavy synthesizer, and, they were moving in a different direction with Roll the Bones, but I still like that album a lot. My number 7, I'm going to go to the Caress of Steel album, and I'm going to go with the Necromancer, which, the most epic, for me anyway, the most epic track, the most progressive, I think, track on that album. And it's one that, it starts off very slow. You've got a little bit of narration, which is unusual for a song, and you're not sure exactly what direction it's going to go. It sounds very mellow. And then it starts, again, like all great Rush songs, it starts to build, and then it gets heavier. And then you've got the great instrumental interplay and guitar solos. And it just goes so many different places. And it's dark. It reminds me in spots of Black Sabbath. But I think it's a great track. It's my favorite on Caress of Steel. And one song that, and again, my list of songs that when I listen to Rush songs, these are ones that I listen to more than the others, and Necromancer is always the one that I love to play off Caress of Steel.
It's got, I think, some of the heaviest Rush moments, when it the stop start there, but also the middle, like it's one of 2 Rush songs also that sort of reference The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. The Necromancer, of course, Sauron in The Hobbit, but I also love how they weave in the 3 travelers, men of Willowdale. You might be thinking, well, who is that? Is that Frodo and Sam and Gollum? No, it's the band. because Willowdale was a suburb of Toronto, where Geddy and Alex were from, not Neil. And what I love about it is Willowdale sounds like a Tolkien, it sounds like a name of a Middle Earth place, Willowdale. It just happened to work out that way. And of course, the other song is Rivendell from Fly By Night, which is a little bit more direct. But I mean, yeah, a lot of bands, Black Sabbath did The Wizard, Led Zeppelin did Ramble On, Misty Mountain Hop. A lot of bands were reading Tolkien in the early 70s, it seems. Speaking of heavy Rush, though, my next track is the entirety of side 1 of 2112, the song 2112. If somebody says that's cheating, okay, let's do what they normally do and say Overture and Temples of Syrinx, but I can never get tired of hearing that. I like this whole album. I like the 5 songs on side 2 as well. And when I first got this album, I was just buying the Rush albums as I came across them, and I didn't realize how significant this album was to their catalog. I'd already heard the first 3, but I was missing albums all over the place. This just happened to be the next one I got. And I remember the first time listening to it with headphones with the swishing, swirling synth at the beginning of it. And then the overture kicks in. I knew that something really cool was about to happen. And then I realized later, I'm like, no wonder this is so, it's no wonder this was their breakthrough album. It was the right one to do it. But I love every part of the first, I love the grand finale as well. I love every part of 2112. So that's my next song.
And they actually kind of defied their record company, because a record company did not want them putting out an album like that. They wanted more songs like Fly By Night, more radio friendly stuff, because they were about to get kicked off their record label. They're like, if this next album doesn't hit, they really were at risk of losing their record contract and fading into obscurity. So they really, not only did they stay the course and said, no, this is the music that we want to make, and we're going to go ahead with this, and we know that we can gain an audience with this kind of music, and they did. And 2112 is one of their most brilliant albums, and I maintain it's a progressive rock album. So
totally is. It totally is. I love the fact that it took a lot of guts, and they were 3 young guys. They were all in their I guess at that time they'd have been 23, 24 years old. And they said, we're young enough, we can do something else with our lives. We don't want to make music that the record company wants us to make. But because they went ahead and did it, and 2112 was their first gold album, that bought them their freedom. And, you got to, it's just one of the many things I admire about this band. They truly never compromised. They always did it their way. And because they did it their way, I think it's because it gave them the opportunity to do all of the other changes that they would do over the years. That really opened the door for all of it. And it was pretty much like Caress of Steel. It had 2, it had a long epic song on it. Press of Steel actually had 2, but then it had shorter songs. They did the exact same thing, again, pretty much, that the record company told them not to do. I do think it was better. I like Press of Steel, but I do think it was better. It was more focused. And, that's the one that did it for them. And it still holds up.
Yeah. All right. We're on number 7, right? 7.
I think we're on number, I think we're down to, I've only got 5 left.
Oh, are we? Okay. I don't have mine numbered. I just have them like in a list. But my next one, if we're on number 6, is Spirit of Radio off of Permanent Waves. Love that one. What a great stadium rocker. But I just love like that opening guitar assault with the distortion on it. And then it just takes a while to settle into that rhythm when they finally get into the verses. And then I love that little, almost like a little reggae interlude that they have there, which is so very cool. So out of left field, but they make it work. And then it just goes into, it's just a great FM radio song, but it doesn't compromise, any of their artistic values. It's a great opening track to my favorite album. And it's fast, it's slow in spots. It's just, it all works. It's fantastic. It shows off what a great ensemble Rush were, and that they could fit it into a tight structure and get a song like that on the radio, not just because they name check radio, but because it's a great song, great melody. It's an earworm and one of Rush's best.
Yeah, I put that in the same category as Tom Sawyer. I never get tired of it. Mm-hmm. Those 2 songs are probably 2 of the best opening songs on any album ever. I mean, you just can't go wrong with either of those. My next one, I know the numbers because I had a cassette to represent each one of them. So it's my number 5, and it comes from this album, Grace Under Pressure. You'd mentioned being a Grace Under Pressure fan. Grace Under Pressure wasn't my first Rush album, but it was the first Rush album I heard from start to finish. And the track that I'm going to pick is the final song, Between the Wheels. Maybe a little bit of a darker track, but I do have fond memories of seeing them. The one time I did get to see them on the R30 tour in Toronto in 2004, they had dug this song out and put it into the set. And I remember being so happy about that. It's a dark song. It's heavy. It's heavy and synthy at the same time. They managed that. Alex's solo is so melodic and it goes through so many changes in it. And Geddy's vocals, again, very heartfelt. And I love the last part, the brother, can you spare another war, another wasteland, another lost generation? The way he sings that last line when he goes a little bit higher, it's just so cool. Gets me every time, they say. But yeah, Grace Under Pressure is great. I could have gone with Distant Early Warning or After Image, any of the songs, Red Sector A, but I'm choosing Between the Wheels.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of the artwork on Grace Under Pressure. I have to say, it's just sort of, it's nice, but Rush is known for so many kind of iconic images that one just sort of is like, okay, I guess.
You ever notice the eye in it?
No,
It's okay. It's hard to tell with the cassette, but there's an eye right above where my finger is. There's a little eye looking out. Yeah, it's a strange cover for sure.
yeah, interesting, but I still love that album. My number 5, I'm going with an instrumental, and you would not think this would be the song I would go to from this album, but I still get goosebumps when I hear this track. But I'm going to the Moving Pictures album, and I'm going with YYZ. I love that instrumental. It is so fantastic. I mean, it's just like, are you kidding me? This band is amazing, and I never get tired of hearing it, and I just love it because everybody gets to shine on that song. It's got so many different tempos in it, and it's just, kind of like some of the instrumental, like La Via Strangiato, or however you pronounce that, kind of like that song for me, which almost made my list because I like that one also. But Rush's instrumentals are just fantastic, and that one's definitely my favorite.
Yeah, you got to listen. You got to wonder sometimes. I mean, sometimes you listen to the albums, you know them so well, you just kind of put them on. You got to really think about, especially a song like YYZ. How do you conceive of something like that? How do you conceive of doing what they do on that song? That's a crazy riff. It makes no. How would you even think to go there as a guitar player or a bass player? And the fact that they made an instrumental that actually sounds, it fits Moving Pictures because it is cinematic. It's about airports. YYZ is the airport code for Toronto International Airport. For them, it's about coming home. When you see YYZ come up, and you see it on luggage tags, you'll see like a 3-letter code. And that means somewhere. That's a city, or that's a destination. And it goes through such cool changes. Love the synth in the middle of it when it kind of calms down a little bit. Alex's solo is amazing. I love the little. It sounds like breaking glass, but it's actually, I've read it's a 1/4-inch piece of plywood being smashed against something. That's how they created that smashing sound. But yeah, good choice. Next one is special for. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, I'm not a huge instrumental fan. I like my songs with vocals. And, in some instrumentals, I'm like, well, this would be better if it had some vocals on it. But with that track, it keeps you interested the entire way through. You don't even miss the vocals. You don't even miss Geddy's voice on there because it's so interesting. It's moving all the time. But anyway, I won't say any more about it, but I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, the melody is in the playing.
Yeah.
You don't need vocals there. Yeah. Next one, my number 4 is a special one for me. And not only do I love the song, but it is the distinction of, it's the first Rush song I ever heard. Opening track from Power Windows, The Big Money, a song which almost cracked the US Top 40. It peaked at number 45. And I remember hearing this song in late 1985, there was a Top 40 radio station I listened to religiously. And I was on my Christmas break, and later on at night, I think it was 11 o'clock at night, they had a top 5 request countdown. And the song was obviously getting a lot of play on top 40. It almost hit the top 40. But for those 5 nights when I was home listening to that, I heard that song every night. And I had heard of a band called Rush, but I'd never heard anything from them. I was basically listening to top 40 radio. That's the first song I ever heard by them. And it's always been one of my favorites. I love it. It's so bright sounding. They tuned, a lot of bands talk about tuning down. They tuned an entire step up to do that song. So when Alex hits that open, it's an open B chord because he's got his guitar tuned an entire step up. I think that, Neil's drums, I love Neil's drums, and especially the end fills where they're just going da 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 da. He does the fill. He'll do he does that little triplet part in a different spot every time. And it's just brilliant. The video, I don't know. You might think the video's kind of cheesy now. They're playing on what looks like a giant Monopoly board, but it was probably one of their most popular videos. It got a lot of play. And it's a catchy song too. And lyrically, even though it's a bright sounding song, it's about basically how money can corrupt, but you don't really think about it because you're too busy singing along. It was an opening track for like 2 of their tours, and I still like listening to it today.
Yeah, no, one of Rush's great opening tracks. And yeah, I think the video helped open up Rush to a wider audience than they might have had otherwise. Because I don't know that album got a whole lot, at least over here, it didn't get a whole lot of radio play growing up for me. I saw it on MTV. That was the first time that I actually heard it. And then, I later found the album. But yeah, it's that's a great one. And, again, so many bands have songs about money. But Rush still found a way to make it different, make it unique. And it's very much Rush, very much 80s Rush. Mine is going to be off of the Hemispheres album. I am going to go with the opening track, Cygnus X1 Book 2, Hemispheres. I got this album. This was one of the not one of the first Rush albums that I ever had, but I bought it. I was a part of a music club, the BMG Music Club, and I got Hemispheres and A Farewell to Kings both at the same time. And I think it's great because they're definitely sister albums, A Farewell to Kings, kind of part 1, and not just the fact that, the final track on Farewell to Kings is part 1 of, the Cygnus, whatever you want to call it, the Cygnus series or whatever it is. But it's a great opening track, and it's long, it's progressive. I think the last time that Rush was full on progressive rock on one of their albums, but I think it's great. And I have no idea what it's about, but I don't care. I don't pay attention too much to the lyrics, but I think instrumentally it's cool. And I know they're singing about something that has to do with progressive rock, whatever they're talking about, I don't know, but it works for me. And I think it's a great lead off track. And I think Hemispheres is a real good album.
Yeah, it's about like they're using like the Greek gods to illustrate left and right sides of the brain, the heart and the mind. And yeah, it's progressive rock as it gets. Musically and lyrically. It's the last time that they did a sidelong piece like that. Yeah, I like it too. My next one comes from, it's just a coincidence. It's their biggest selling album, 4 million sold in the States alone, which is pretty impressive. But it also happens to be my personal favorite, Moving Pictures, 1981. And it might be an obvious choice. I'm going with Limelight. Always loved the song. Alex's guitar solo is amazing. I always direct people to the Exit Stage Left home video to watch Alex switching his pedals around while he's doing that solo. I've always looked at those guys as when they're up there on stage, they know exactly what they're doing and they're just experts at it, but it doesn't sacrifice the emotion of the solo. I think it's one of their most melodic songs. It was a personal song for Neil about being kind of out of place in a profession that expects you to be in the public eye at all times and basically become public property. And he was just never comfortable with that. He was, had the social anxiety, and a lot of people thought he was conceited and stuck up, and that's just not what it is. And only someone who has that sort of anxiety would understand. You don't always feel like people in your face. You don't know. They're coming at you and they're talking to you like you're great. They're talking 100 miles an hour, or maybe they're being more aggressive. And I think he very eloquently puts kind of how it feels. And basically, it's like, it's the sacrifice that you make if this is what you want to do. And if you keep, the underlying theme as it goes, they wanted to make the music they wanted to make, and a lot of people happen to like it. So this is what it's like, in the gilded cage, as they say. And that might all sound a little bit deep, but it's written into a song that's so melodic, it's compelling, and it is one of their most played radio songs, and it's why, because it's catchy. People latch onto the riff right away, and it's great. It's a great song.
It's a simple riff too. It's not, like this blow you away like fancy riff, but that's
for a Rush song. It's actually learnable.
Exactly. Yeah. To be, Jimmy Page to be able to figure out that riff. But, it's very much a be careful what you wish for kind of a song, because, every band says, we want to get popular, we want to sell millions of records. And then you get there and then you realize, well, there's a dark side to it as well. And for, all the fame and fortune, there's definitely, it's not everything that it's cracked up to be. Kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd's Have a Cigar song a little bit, which is sort of like the flip side of fame and all the stuff that you have to put up with when you get there. But yeah, no, definitely an iconic, and probably one of the first Rush songs that I ever heard, actually, because it was played so much on radio, that and Tom Sawyer off that album. My number 2 is a song that you've already mentioned, and I'm going to cheat as well. I'm going to go with the whole first side of 2112. That whole suite. I'm sorry, it's all one song. Subdivide it however you want, Temples of Syrinx, whatever you want to do. But the whole song, I think, is fantastic. And just knowing so much was on the line at that time and what they came up with, they came up with, people think of 2112 as a concept album. It's really not. It's just that song. But because it's so long and it's got so much going for it, I think it's great. And I love the fact that you can subdivide it up. You can, you could separate out the, Temples of Syrinx separately, or, I think it still all works. And, it's great for a reason. That's a lot of people I know, it's their favorite Rush album, for that song. I love it's got that futuristic concept to it. And yeah, I love everything about that record. I love the artwork. I love the other songs on there as well, but can't leave that one off my list.
Yeah, and because of it, forever and a day, every Rush fan, whenever you go into a store and they ring up whatever you bought and it comes to 2112, you ever see 2112 anywhere, you automatically think Rush. It's like 5150, right? It's just just one of those things. And I used to wonder why they made it 2112, other than the fact that it's what's the word that for word they're spelled the same backwards and forwards or whatever, not anagram. It's not coming to me now, but I also think it's because they wanted to make it a year that they weren't likely to get to. None of us are likely to get to, but I really think in 2112 they'll still be listening to 2112. Yeah, it's great. My next one is from a similar period. It's one of my favorite Rush songs. Always has been. Last song on side 1 of A Farewell to Kings, Xanadu. It's probably my favorite long Rush song. It's 11, 12 minutes long. It doesn't feel like it's 11, 12 minutes long, because at no point does it ever drag. I love every part of it. I love the riffs. I love the keyboards, the mysterious sounding keyboards. Again, it's a song at the beginning of it. You can hear like birds chirping. They recorded parts of it outside. I just love that. Neil's drum fills are perfect. Geddy's vocals are just right. Alex's solo at the end is really, really cool. And I also, I really like the version that's on Exit Stage Left. I don't know why, but there's something about seeing them come out with the double neck guitars. And, Geddy's had the bass on the top and then the rhythm guitar on the bottom. He was playing rhythm guitar and pedals during Alex's solo, which I always thought was so cool when they shared the duties like that. But the smoke coming up, and it's just that's one that I specifically remember the time I saw them on R30. They did that song and they had the double necks, and it was a really cool moment. So yeah, Xanadu.
Well, this is ironic because my number two is Xanadu also from that album, and for all the reasons you described. But I love that kind of creepy little keyboard in there after they go Xanadu, and then that keyboard there, I think is so cool, and it just shows Rush was into doing the keyboard thing even before the 80s. They were always incorporating it into their music. But yeah, it's epic, it's cinematic. Just so many things going for it. It's soft, it's heavy, great solo, great lyrics, great vocal by Geddy, who was singing in the 70s on a higher register than he did in the 80s. So you don't hear, after Hemispheres, you don't hear Geddy sing the same way really anymore. But I love that track, love that album.
Yeah. So my number one, this is one of the, actually my top two songs were pretty easy. I knew that what they would be. So my number one has always been one of my favorite Rush songs, and it's one that just gets better every time I hear it. I've never ever gotten tired of it. I already showed the Signals album off when I showed the Analog Kit, so I'm gonna go with the Show of Hands, which also contains, it's actually the second song, Subdivisions. My favorite Rush song, hands down. Will never not be my favorite Rush song. I appreciate it for so many reasons. I think musically, it's one of their more melodic. It's one of their most melodic and most compelling compositions. I would actually call it a composition. Geddy's vocals are just perfect in it. I love the synths all the way through it. I never had a problem with the synths in it. Neil's drums are amazing. And lyrically, it really spoke to me as a kind of an unpopular kid in school. And I've said this before, I didn't realize just how much I related to it on a lyrical level, even though I was that age when I was getting into Rush in the late 80s. I was 12, 13, 14 years old, those awkward teenage years. And, but over the years, I've just gotten to realize that, wow, that describes what it was like. And especially when you combine it with the video, there's the kid that's always walking by themselves. They're makes you a target for bullies. It makes you, it's easy to make fun of those kids, right? And in some ways, it just makes you like it even more because you realize that these guys grew up the same way you did. They weren't popular kids in school. And the fact that it took them to, they were almost 30 when the song was written and came out, but it was obviously something that was waiting to come out in a song. And I just love the way that they did it. And I love the way that Neil compares, the subdivisions of, a home planning zone where every house looks exactly the same. Every street is perfectly manicured, to the fact that when you go to school, there's cliques, there's the jocks, there's the stoners, there's the nerds, or whatever term you want to use, but there are subdivisions. And it's such a strange, you see the title and you're like, well, how are they going to sing it? Well, they don't. Yeah, it sounds as fresh to me now as it did the first time I heard it, first time I saw the video for it, which is the first time I heard it. And it's probably always going to be my favorite Rush song.
Yeah. Well, for me, I wasn't into Rush when Signals came out. Got into Rush a little bit later, but I can imagine somebody who had been a Rush fan up to that point, and you go out, you buy Signals, and the first thing you hear is Subdivisions with that synthesizer, and then you get into those synthesizer riff. It's got to be a similar experience to people who, now I was a Van Halen fan when 1984 came out, and I remember the shock of hearing 1984 come on when you put the cassette on. You're like, what is this? And then Jump comes on, and it's more synthesizer. I got to imagine it was the same idea back then for Rush fans, like, whoa, what's going on here? I did not expect to hear this. What is going on? But I think they do it brilliantly. I agree with you. It is still, it sounds as fresh and as powerful today as it did back, I'm sure, when it came out. But I've always been a fan of that track. Made my honorable mention, but could have easily been higher. And I think it's a great track, and it's universal because everybody at one time or another, in high school has felt like this is Lord of the Flies or something. But You know, it's, yeah, a great track. My number one, I am going to back to my favorite album, Permanent Waves, for Free Will. Um, just, it's always been my favorite Rush track. I never get tired of hearing it. I love just the breakdown, the different sections of it. Are we ordained a prisoner in chains? That whole section right there that's the money shot right there for me. I love that. You know, the whole idea of it, and just where they come up with so many different riffs in the same song, and they make it all work. And it's a radio friendly track, but it's so unique. Nothing else on the radio sounded like that. Nothing else was as inventive in rock and roll at that time. And I'm including Van Halen. I think that it was such a classic song, and it showed off what great musicians they were, and what great songwriters they were, what great lyricists. You know, everything is on display in that song. And I mean, you just got, I think, really one of the strongest two opening tracks on any album, with Spirit of the Radio and then right into Free Will. You just caught your breath after Spirit of the Radio, and then you're right into Free Will, which is just another fantastic rocker. And then, you know, for me, Jacob's Ladder right after that, which is another favorite song. You know, one of the reasons why I love that album. But Free Will has always just been my favorite Rush song of all time.
And that middle section, I mean, you know, Geddy starts with a do 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 do. He's doing that, and then Alex is solo. Like, you know, at one point, that's probably some of his fastest playing, but yet he's alternating between like a rhythm part and his lead is like, and you know, and then the moment when it goes back into the thing. I've never heard a live version of that yet. When they get to that section, there isn't a huge roar from the crowd. And, you know, anybody that doesn't think Rush is progressive rock, I'd be like, okay, Mr. Wise Guy, you try and play that. That's some tricky playing.
Oh, absolutely. And if Rush had only ever made Permanent Waves, if that was the only thing they ever did, I mean, I think they'd still be one of that'd be one of the greatest albums, just because, you know, I think it's lost because Rush has so many brilliant songs. They've got so many great riffs. They got so many great lyrics. I mean, they have done it over and over and over again. Their discography is just so impressive. I think sometimes we just kind of lose perspective on how amazing those tracks are. And not just that album, but just take any album in isolation from Rush. And you just, because of the context of Rush's work, it's so brilliant, it's so amazing that those little moments, you forget how to appreciate those and how fantastic they are. And they did it album after album after album. And that's why Rush is one of the greatest bands of all time, is because they didn't just have, you know, a few albums. They didn't just do it for 3 or 4 albums and then broke up. I mean, we're talking, I mean, it's 5 decades actually, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010s, and well, now 4 decades. Getting ahead of myself there. And I'm not good at math, but anyway, it may as well have been for 5 decades, but feels like it was. But, you know, still to have that staying power and still be coming up with amazing music after that many years, you know, is really saying something. And I think that's a great way to wrap up the video, is talking about, you know, how great Rush is at the end of the day.
And the fact that, you know, because they made all that great music, it just made narrowing it down to 10 songs really, really tough. I mean, on any given day, on another day, I could have given you a top 10 list that would have had Free Will, The Spirit of Radio, Tom Sawyer, probably Red Barchetta, Distant Early Warning, Bastille Day, Passage to Bangkok. I mean, they just, it didn't never ended with those guys. And even though they changed dramatically musically over the years, the integrity was always there. And you hit upon something I was thinking of, because I have been on quite a Rush kick lately, not just Clockwork Angels, but I've been just random albums here and there listening to. And sometimes I'll be listening and think, you know, it isn't just that I'm always talking about this band and I've been listening to them for so long. They really were that good. They really were amazing. And they're one of those bands that maybe you don't like them, maybe you don't like Geddy's voice, the music might not do anything for you, but I think most people will concede that obviously they're great musicians. So, you mentioned the decades. Their influence is gone and has gone well beyond their recorded music. I don't know that there will ever be a time when somebody somewhere you won't find you'll see a Rush song pop up in a TV show or to be in a movie somewhere or somewhere you wouldn't expect. It's just going to live on. And because of that, they got one of the most rock solid catalogs of any band I could think of. They never ever phoned in an album. And it's because of that commitment to quality that, number one, we never get outtakes of, we never get songs we've never heard before, which I have a love-hate relationship with that, because just because they didn't think it was any good doesn't mean we wouldn't think it was good. But I respect the fact that their standards were so high. But the other thing is, and then just like that, I lost it. But the fact that there are no outtakes, but the fact that they never ever phoned in an album is another reason why it's hard to narrow anything down. It would have been hard enough to come up with my top 10 albums, never mind songs.
Yeah, they're almost a band where you have to go top 10 songs of the 70s, top 10 songs of the 80s.
Yeah.
Even then, you're going to have songs that you have to leave off just because their catalog is so rich. And they never had, one of the things with Rush, and some people might argue, and they won't be shy about arguing in the comment section and say, but I'm going to say Rush never had a bad album. They had weak songs on certain albums, but I don't think there's any album where you could say, oh, they really lost the plot or they phoned it in. There's nothing to like on this album. For me, I'm not a big fan of Hold Your Fire, but there's still a lot to like on it. I don't think it's a bad album. It's just all the way through. It's not necessarily for me, but there's not any Rush, considering how many albums they had, to not have a single bad album. You might argue with the production on, some of their, when you had the whole, I forget the noise wars or whatever it was, where everything was compressed. But even then, the songs and the performances are great, whether you agree with the production or not. But yeah, Rush is a fantastic band, one of the greats of all time. There's no arguing that. If you want to leave your own list, what's your top 10? Put it in the comment section. I'd appreciate that. Thank you again, Tim, so much for your Rush expertise, your cassettes. I'm now wishing I had grabbed my cassettes and had them within arm's reach. I would love to have shown some of those too. And maybe at some point we can do a Rush cassette video. That would be a lot of fun. I would love to do that, but this won't be the last time. I'm sure you'll see Tim on my channel. I always appreciate his contributions. Again, Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Make sure you go over and check it out. Thanks so much, Tim, for joining me. And everybody take care.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. If the day ever comes, I don't want to talk about Rush. I don't want to see that day.
Well, no, something's really wrong. Yep. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.